love to welcome to the show today Stacee Magee. She is fluent in all things spiritual. She is a medical intuitive, a psychic medium, an author, and a near-death experiencer. And she's here to share about all of that and more. So welcome to the show, Stacee.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm just so excited to be here and hopefully share with you my experience. So thank you for having me, Christine.
Thank you. And I'm so grateful that you accepted this invitation. Like we were chatting before I shared with you, I've been binging all of your videos on TikToks. There were a few things that really caught my attention that we'll dive into later. But first, I would love for you to share with the viewers your experience with your near-death experience.
Holy guacamole. Well, sure, absolutely. I'll be happy to share. And I will say that it is my understanding that it actually was not my first near-death experience. When I was 2, there's a story that my parents told me that I had received a shot as a kid that I had a really severe reaction to. I stopped breathing, turned blue. My dad, luckily, the doctor's office was right next to the hospital, and they rushed me over and resuscitated me. Um, and I don't have a lot of memories of that experience, unfortunately, but it's always been something that's been in the back of my mind, like, this isn't the first go round that you've gone through with this. And so that was really interesting. And I think we could talk more about that too. But my near-death experience that I really have the best recollection of was about 2016. And it started out really kind of normal. I mean, I'm a mom of 7 kids, and my daughter got this pretty heinous strep throat. And it was a pretty bad infection. And, I took her to the doctors, and we took her to the ER, and she got all her antibiotics. And of course, I'm the one who's taking care of her. And, as parents, when we take care of our kids, we end up catching whatever plague they have. And so I started coming down sick. And so, of course, I did the same thing. I'm like, I go to the doctors, I get the antibiotics. I'm like, I'll be better. I'll be better soon. I also had a business trip planned to Las Vegas, like a couple days after. And like any person, I'm like, I'm on antibiotics. I should be getting better. This isn't a big deal. I might feel a little cruddy the first couple days, but I'm still going because this, I already paid for this trip. I bought VIP tickets to this like business convention where we were going to meet Gary Vaynerchuk, who's like this big business guru guy. And like, of course, I was not going to skip it. And it was interesting that in the back of my mind, I kept getting this feeling like, don't go, don't go, don't go, stay home. And of course, I ignored that completely. And my friends were pressuring me, like, you can't skip out on us. You have to go. And I'm like, okay, fair warning, I'm sick, and it's contagious. Do you sure you want me to go? And they're like, yeah, absolutely. Go, go, go. And I remember I was in my minivan driving up there, and I had to pull over multiple times because I was feeling so unwell. And that really should have been a clue to me, like, hey, you're not feeling so hot. Don't go, right? But I continued on my way. And I remember I picked up one of my friends at the airport, and she looked at me, she's like, oh, you don't look very good. I'm like, I told you I was sick, and you guys insisted that I came. And so, I didn't have great boundaries back then. I kind of let people just tell me what to do and how to do it. And I was just so focused on that hustle culture and I'm a boss babe. I'm going to be a millionaire with my business product. And a lot of people don't know this about me, but I own a manufacturing business. We manufacture baby products, and I wrote my own patents. And, you can even Google my patents. I think they've expired because I've kind of not done anything with them, but like they're there. And it's like, that was my focus. I was like, this is my thing. I'm going to do this. And, that hustle culture is such a toxic culture that I was like, it's okay, I'll be fine. I'll just hustle through this. I'll man up and, like woman up or whatever and get through this. And I remember just going to every little class and session and like coughing my brains out. And I just was feeling worse and worse. And they actually have this massage therapist that was there to give like 15-minute massages for free. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna get this. And she's like, oh girl, you look really bad. Are you okay? And I'm like, no, I'm on antibiotics, I'm fine. And she's like dousing me in like every essential oil you could think of known to man. And I tend to be on the more crunchy side. So I was hitting it with all my teas and like my vitamin C, like in the background. And we get like 3 days in, and I remember I told my friend, and we were sharing a hotel room, I was like, I don't feel well enough to go today. I'm gonna stay in bed. And so I stayed in bed for a couple hours, and she and everybody was calling me, you gotta get over here. This looks so good. You're missing it. And so I dragged myself out of bed and I went, and I remember just feeling so horrible again. Kind of was, I should have known, right? Like all of these things, you should have known that something was up. And finally, like they're like, oh, we're going out to dinner, forced me out to dinner. And I was coughing so hard, I literally peed my pants. And I was like, okay, guys, I gotta go back. And I get back to the hotel, and something inside me was like, you need to go to the hospital. And I was like, do this. I'm in Vegas. I don't even know where to go. And then it was like someone was like literally standing behind me going, Stacee, go to the hospital now. And so I told my friend, I said, like, I know it's probably nothing, but I think I'm going to go to the hospital and get checked out and just, maybe get a different antibiotic, and I'll come right back. And she, like, I remember she rolled her eyes at me. And, through this whole time, she was not very supportive, and it should have been a really big clue, right? But I remember she kind of rolled my eyes at me, and she's like, you're going to miss this networking event, and this is a big deal. And I actually went to this networking event where I ended up coughing in the face of Gary Vaynerchuk. And to this day, I don't know if I got him sick, but he's a really nice guy though. But eventually I finally was like, I really got to go to the hospital. And I remember going downstairs and trying to catch a cab, and every cab would pass me by. Like they take one look at me and be like, don't get in my cab. And finally, this really nice gentleman was like, okay, I will give you a ride to the hospital, but you have to stick your head out my window when I take you, because apparently that's how bad I looked. And I get to the hospital. I remember going up to the countertop, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel very unwell. And this nurse kind of just looks me up and down. She kind of takes some of my information. And not 10, 15 minutes later, I had nurses like, oh my God, we think you have sepsis. And they're like rushing me maybe back. And I remember they were like drawing my blood, and I'm kind of like, what the hell is going on? And they're like these almost look like little soda bottles. Like I think they drew like half my blood volume out of me. And I was like sitting on this hospital bed, coughing my brains out, trying to call my husband, who wouldn't wake up because he sleeps like the dead, calling my father-in-law, like, please go wake up my husband. Something's really wrong. And this nurse comes in, she's, oh my God, we are so glad you came in. If you would have waited till the morning, you would have been dead. And as they're rushing around and like shoving IVs into my arm, I start just kind of like, it's the weirdest thing. It's like your vision goes like in and out, and like you can hear people around you, but you can't at the same time. And I just remember like all of this stuff going around me, but at the same time, I felt like instantly at peace, and just like this warm, peaceful feeling came over me. And like I wasn't really feeling pain anymore, which probably should have been a clue. And I don't know really what happened after then, but I just remember like going from this hospital room to being in this vision, and or this dream, or like some people are like, oh, it was a hallucination, you were losing oxygen to your brain. um but I remember very distinctly being in this place, and it looked like the earth, but it was very dark, and everything was kind of black. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is like awful. And like all the trees were burnt, and I was super upset. I was like, oh my gosh, what happened to the earth? Like it's like burnt. And I see this man start to walk towards me, and he kind of looks a little like my dad. So he had like olive skin and like this dark wavy hair, but these like really piercing kind of like blue-green eyes. And and I was like, oh, this must be my brother that passed away. I remember thinking that distinctly because I had a brother before me that passed away, because I was like, oh, he looks a lot like my dad. And as he got closer to me, I realized, I was like, oh my God, this is not my brother, this is Christ. And he walked up to me and he goes, why are you crying? Why are you sad? And I said, well, look at the earth. It's ruined and it's destroyed. And he goes, oh no, don't worry about this. I can't remember exactly what he said, but he was like, oh, you shouldn't be crying about this. And he goes, look, and he puts his hand on this tree. And I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Avatar, because like when I saw the movie Avatar after this, I was like, oh my God, that's my thing. Um, it was almost like blue light came out of his hand, and as it did, it creeped up this tree, and the tree suddenly came back to life. And like the leaves came back and the bark came back and the grass spread and grew. And he goes, see, all things can be fixed and repaired. And it must be like it is. And I remember just staring at this going, what? And not understanding, like now I understand what he was meaning by showing me this. But I just remember like, what is this? And then like the next minute I was in this hospital room, and I actually still have this photo of me waking up and taking a picture of all the IVs, because they put a lot of IVs in you when you have sepsis. And I was like, okay, that happened. That was weird. And it was just this beautiful moment though of being at peace and knowing, it was like I had this knowing that everything that I thought was important wasn't important, and that I knew like all of this spiritual stuff that I had always kind of doubted my whole life, and something that religion tells you, or like I'm like, nope, that's not true. But a lot of things are, and then there's other things. And it was like something in my mind just opened up this channel to understanding a world that I wasn't always sure existed before then. I don't know if that makes sense, but it was very, very weird, and it was very comforting and strange, and just like this knowing that there was so much more beyond everything that I thought was real, and that it was that dying wasn't scary like I thought it was, and that this existence here is just a temporary moment, and it's an eternal timeline. Um, and this part of this knowing for me was knowing that I had a greater calling here on earth that I had been avoiding. And, you know, if we go back to when I was 2 and I had that other near-death experience, you know, I can wonder if that was a catalyst for opening up some of this spiritual gifts and knowledge. Because looking back as a kid, I knew when people were sick. I remember walking up to a lady and being like, your liver's sick and you're going to die soon. And my mom was like, oh my God, don't say that to people. And I was like, but she is. And like not comprehending, and still to this day, I do this. And I actually told my kids a couple of days ago about somebody that I knew was going to pass away. And they're like, Mom, why do you say things like that? And I'm like, my autistic brain is like, but it's true. And, you know, and so far, like I'm not usually very accurate on time frames, but I usually know when someone's getting ready to cross over. But growing up as a kid, I would see spiritual things. I would know when people were sick. I would also, and I kind of get scared to say these things because I don't like sharing this part of me because it feels awkward and weird, and there's like this fear of sharing this part of me, but I'll share it, is that I could often touch someone and they would get better from whatever illness or injury that they had. And I even remember distinctly this time where my dad had a back surgery and he was in tremendous amount of pain, a horrible amount of pain. And I remember taking my hand and putting it on his back and wishing that I could take his pain from him. And I remember seeing his face like relax and get calm. And he fell asleep. And the funny thing is that I actually ended up having back pain in the same area that he had surgery. until he had a follow-up surgery after that. But I'd have dreams of the future and things that would happen. And before my spiritual awakening, and some people might remember this, there's a really big tornado system that hit the town of Joplin, Missouri. And it was actually 2 tornadoes that hit this town. And I had a dream about this happening where 2 tornadoes, and I dreamed of them coming towards this white hospital and hitting this school. And I remember waking up and like, oh my God, I need to warn these people. I need to warn these people. And my husband was like, what are you going to do? Call every town in the Midwest and say a tornado's coming? What are they, and I remember feeling so helpless. And then when that happened and I saw it on the news, I remember screaming to God how much I hated God. And I was like, why do you give me this when there's nothing I can do to help people? And I understand more now why, because I heard stories later about children seeing angels and butterflies and miracles happening. But, it makes me wonder if that first experience opened things up. And my second experience, because after Joplin happened, I went to God and I said, take these gifts away. I don't want them. I don't want to do this anymore. Stop sending me this stuff. I don't know what to do with it or how to help people. And then I had this second experience, and then everything came rushing back to me. And I was like, okay. And like, I knew where my purpose was. I didn't know how to do anything. And it took me several years to even get to the point where I was like, I still feel like I'm figuring it out. I still like don't understand, but it's almost like I feel like it happened to say like, hey, no, I gave you something. You can't avoid this. Bring it back. Right. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I'm rambling. Just
Thank you so much for sharing your experiences. There's a lot I would love to touch on, but first, what was the significance of that scene with Jesus, the blue energy, earth?
Mhm. I think, oh, sorry.
Oh no, that was it. Did you, I thought you said you had a realization of what that meant for you.
I
Could you?
did. Um, I think a lot of us, even now, look at the world and the earth around us, and we're like, why are things so horrible? Why are things not perfect? For me, it was a symbolic destruction almost of who I was, of burning down my understanding of who I was so that I could understand who I truly am as, an eternal spiritual being, of someone who is not just my physical body, but also my spiritual body. And so it was multi-layered, because it's like, here, let me show you, we're going to burn things down and rebuild. But it was also him showing me, let me show you how things can be restored. And it helped me understand also, and of course this is Gospel by Stacee, because I can't remember the exact scripture and I'm not quoting it properly, but there's a scripture after Christ passed over, but before he ascended, where he was talking to one of his disciples, and he said, of these things you can do that I do and more. And I remember going, oh my God, he was here to teach me I could do what he could do. And I'm not saying I'm Jesus, because please don't interpret it that way, but that he was here to teach us we can heal each other. We can teach each other. He was literally teaching his disciples to walk on water. And I don't know if I could ever walk on water, but it was like this clicking moment of like, oh, there was so much that we were missing. And that this vision was like showing me like, hey, let me show you how you can heal things, how you can heal trees and other things and other people. And the magnitude of that has not fully clicked with me until even more recently, because I 4 years ago was diagnosed with heart failure. They said my heart was enlarged, I had a murmur, and the doctor distinctly was like, in about 10 years, you're probably going to need a transplant. And so I was like, oh crap. And it was damaged because of the sepsis. I had a streptococcal pneumonia infection from my near death. And he was like, it's just, he's like, sorry, luck of the draw, My family also has some heart stuff, so that didn't help either. But um, I remember a couple, probably 6 months to a year ago, I started envisioning that light coming to my heart and healing, that light opening up like I saw in my vision. And of course, I took vitamins and I sort of ate healthy. I don't exercise very well, unfortunately. Um, but um,
Um,
let's see, this is October, end of October. I started having what I thought was chest pain, and my husband was like, we're going to the ER. I'm taking you to the ER. And it was kind of right after a meditation. And I remember feeling like this, almost like a pop in my chest. And honestly, it was almost like a relieving, like you never when your joints get stuck and then they pop and you're like, ooh, that feels good. It was almost that feeling, but I told my husband, he's like, that's not a good thing. He's in medical school, so he's got a little medical training. He's like, we're going to the ER. So I went to the hospital and I spent 4 days in the hospital and they ran every test imaginable on me, um, including um, a nuclear stress test and EKGs and like CT scans of my, like so many tests I can't even remember. And I almost even wonder if I had another near death during one of those tests, because I actually reacted to the medication that they gave me. And my heart rate was like, my blood pressure was like high 200s over like 100s. It was like all the nurses and doctors were like, are you okay? Do you feel okay? And I remember my body starting to go numb like it did when I had that experience in Vegas. And I was like, I think I feel okay, but everything's feeling numb. And you could tell, like, see them start to panic. But I never fully lost consciousness there. But it was just like one of those things, like I could feel energy. I could feel all the people that weren't there, like the spiritual ghosty people. There's a lot of ghosts in hospitals there. It was weird. But anyways, after those 4 days, they came back and they're like, there's nothing wrong with your heart at all. In fact, my injection fraction was, I think, 40%. When I saw that first doctor, they said it was 80%, that I had a heart of a 20-year-old. And I was like, huh, I actually didn't believe them. I actually texted my friend who's a doctor. I'm like, I don't believe them. So I went to my cardiologist and got more tests. And my cardiologist also was like, yeah, your heart got better. I don't know what to say. It's cool. And
Wow, that is incredible. Were you working specifically with that blue energy or just doing more of your own self-healing?
Um, I was a little bit with the blue energy. I would envision like little sparkles going into my heart. I would envision energy running through my heart muscles and like opening things up. I also embodied, like teachings of Christ. I was like, am I holding something in my heart where I'm not forgiving? Am I not giving love to myself or others? And so I would think about any moments that I was not holding love in my heart for myself or for others, and I would ask my body to let that go. I would ask my body to send light to my cells and to tell my cells to regenerate to where they're supposed to be.
Mhm.
And I don't even remember every instance of it, but there is one thing I remember once of, and it's kind of a little segue here, but I remember once at night I turned around and I glanced at my husband who was sleeping, and I could see like a blue energy form, like almost like his soul in his body. And I know it sounds so weird. And believe me, I didn't believe in any of this weird spiritual stuff before this stuff happened. Like I feel like almost a nut job talking about this, but like I can't deny what I see, right? Like I can't deny what happens to me. Um, but I remember seeing almost like what looked like his soul, which was that blue glowing energy within his body. And I was like, oh my God, I'm seeing his soul. And I remember like feeling like his soul was confused that I could see him, but it reminded me of that blue light, that eternal energy that came from Christ's hands. And I still don't fully understand that, you know, I wasn't like this spiritual person. I went to church and stuff before this stuff happened, but like all of this spiritual healing stuff is really new to me. And I always tell people like I'm spirit taught. I don't know all the rules. I don't know all the names or technicalities for stuff. But yeah, I just, I don't know how else to describe it except for that, you know, it worked. And my son had a near death this year and I was with him when that happened. And I sent the same energy to him. And I will say that I don't know that that makes me this like all-knowing, powerful Jesus-like healer. I feel like more like I'm just a channel of energy for God and healing, and that we can all heal ourselves and other people, and that's kind of what we're meant to do. I don't know. But I feel like I was able to maybe even just play a small part in helping my son through what should have been deadly injuries for him. So I don't know,
So
maybe Jesus was teaching me how to heal.
yeah, it sounds like it may have been that. And kind of pivoting a little bit, but with all this talk of sickness, there's kind of like this idea in the spiritual community, like if you're sick, something's unhealed within you, or you have more work to do, right? Sometimes there can be a lot of shame in that. And I
Mm-hmm.
know me specifically, with the nature of the work I do with clients, if I don't balance that, I get sick, really, really sick pretty often. And so I'm wondering if you have any insight or perspective as to the role that sickness and health issues can play into our spiritual nature or the meaning of them.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure I'm understanding. So you're wanting me to talk about like how illness affects us spiritually, basically.
Sure,
Or
or even their cause, or if you have any perspective on that.
absolutely. I mean, as a medical intuitive, it's kind of like what I do all day long, right? And what I have found with my clients is that illness and injury occurs due to energetic congestion. Sometimes the energetic congestion is intense emotions, unprocessed emotions, unhealed emotions. Sometimes it's generational traumas, ancestral traumas, things we've inherited from our parents, our grandparents. Um, and I think there's a couple moments that really gave me some really profound like ahas. I was working with a client and all of a sudden her body was showing, there's actually kind of two stories I want to tell about this, but her body was showing that she had witnessed a murder trauma. And I was like, oh my God, you witnessed a murder and this is ingrained in your body. No wonder you're imbalanced. And she goes, no, I never witnessed a murder. What's wrong with you, crazy lady? And I was like, huh. And so I went and kind of checked deeper and I kind of was like, well, let me tell you what I'm seeing. And she goes, oh no, that was a movie that I watched when I was 16. And it was so traumatic. I never watched horror movies again. And then she goes, oh my God, it was so traumatic. And I said, yeah, it was a movie that ingrained with you and created this disruption, right? And so it's very interesting that almost like how I thought myself into healing. Um, she had something that should have been totally benign that created a disruption with her. Um, I had another client who came in and she was like Zen master guru, way more balanced of a human than I am, and like a yoga instructor, and she had adrenal insufficiency, which is a fight or flight um thing, right? It's almost always connected to fight or flight, trauma issues, childhood traumas, things like that. And I was like, what the heck? How does this woman have adrenal? She shouldn't have this. Like she had like I'm checking her energy. I'm like, she had a great childhood. There's nothing that she actively participated in her lifetime to create this. And so I remember, and this is something that actually took me years to figure out what I was doing. But I remember talking to her body, her higher self, and her subconscious, because there's really two parts that we look at. The higher self and the soul is totally different than subconscious.
Mm.
And I was like, show me your original injury. Show me what happened. And I get this vision of this woman running frantically and fearfully through a forest, like she's running from her life. And I told her this. I said, I see this woman. She's in this dress and this like really thick forest. And I was like, does this make any sense to you? And she goes, oh my God, my grandmother ran from the Nazis for 2 months to get to safety during World War II. That's my grandma. And I was like, so this isn't even yours. This is grandma's energy. And grandma never had time to process her fear and let it go. And so it was ingrained in your DNA. And then we get these things that are ingrained in our DNA from these ancestors. And we have like even something a really simple fight, like watching a movie or a cat jumping on your lap and, oh, kitty startled me. And you get a startle that just flips that light switch on for all those genetic things. And then we're over here like, what did I do? And why is this there? Well, it's not even your fault. It belonged to somebody else, you know? Or sometimes it's a soul fracture where your subconscious was just trying to protect you from something horrible, and it fractured off a bit of your energy and left it in the past to protect you. And so it's doing its job, and we need to go in and just release and let that go. But to me, the most important part when I do my readings for my client is not just looking at all, because they come in and they're like, this is broken and that's broken, and that feels so overwhelming, and so I also try to say, like, this is what's powerful within you, right? This is where your hidden healing powers are. This is where your spiritual gifts are. This is who you are as a spiritual being, so that they can be empowered to say, I have that power within me to heal, because everybody has the power to heal, right? Everyone has the power to be their own medical intuitive as well. We just self-doubt and second guess and, forget those things. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does, and much more. And I especially love what you're sharing about the power of our mind, because I'm a hypnotherapist by day. And what you did with visualization and working with energy to basically repair your own heart, to the woman's experience with that mental impression she took on. I mean, that just speaks so powerfully to how much our mind really has control over us. And also to that effect, if we can make ourselves sick, then we can heal ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that I've been learning recently with my clients, because my clients are such wonderful teachers to me, is that sometimes if we're healers, we're picking up and carrying other people's energy. And so I had one client in, and I was picking all this stuff, and she goes, no, that's not mine. That's my fiance's. No, that's my daughter's. And she's like, are you reading my family? And I was like, no, I'm reading you. And we went a little bit deeper, and we realized like she was absorbing and picking up one's energy. And this is something that I do as well. A lot of healers have a really open energy fields, right? Especially if they have yellow or green auras. And so they transmute and pick up other people's energies that drain them. And I was doing the same thing myself. And so I have found I have to have like very specific rituals every day where I'm picking up people's stuff. I even had clients that were like, I was calling out to your soul and talking to your soul 2 weeks before. And I was like, no wonder I was feeling all your stuff for 2 weeks,
Right.
And one of my realizations is that it used to be that people were doing this heavy spiritual work were protected and cared for specifically. They had rituals. I have a friend who's a medicine man, and he does the sage cleansing with the feather before and after he's done. He drinks special teas and waters and foods to help him be protected from that. And now we're kind of out here without those rituals and protections, just trying to do this work that becomes very draining.
Yes, and I can definitely attest to that. That's a lot of what I experience. So what is like your number one favorite tip for balancing or cleansing or protecting?
So, I actually just did a whole class on this, because I used to be very focused with the typical, like, let's just bubble our energy and zip it up. And well, when we're bubbling or protecting our energy, you're limiting your flow of energy, right? Not just between you and your client, but just where it should naturally be, right? And sometimes we do need that protection where we're like if I'm in a crowded space, usually I'll collapse down my energy and I'll just be like, and I'll suck it really close to me, and then I'll put a like big pillar of white light around me. And I always do a pillar because I want to be grounded at the bottom and open at the top. But more recently, I'm like, protection is our boundaries. Protection is not just like this is a kyanite crystal, great protection, energy transmuting, chakra balancing crystal, but it's also about like, what is our boundaries? What are we, I used to do 10 readings a day, 6 days a week, and I burn out like crazy. I don't do that anymore. I do 3 calls a day, 3 days a week. That's it. Right. I mean, I do some free readings and other group sessions and things like that, but learning like where your boundaries are, also learning to ask, and this is important as a healer. One, does the person need your help or do they want your help? And then if they need your help, are you meant to help them? Are you the person that's meant to help them? And then the third question we ask is, if you are the person to help them, what is your boundaries for helping? How long are you supposed to help? What manner are you supposed to help? And I experienced this very distinctly when my son was injured back in March, where Spirit was like, okay, you're to take care of him until they pull the breathing tube out. And after that, you're to leave. And I burned myself out. I actually ended up in the ER because I was doing energy healing on him nonstop and transmuting and protecting the room. And I mean, it obviously worked because the nurses were like, we love coming in your room. It feels like a church in here. It's so peaceful. And I'm like, that's intentional, right?
Mhm.
But they pulled his breathing tube out. And so it's like, time for you to go. And I was like, I can't leave. He's had a brain bleeding, a couple strokes. He still can't move the one side of his body. Like, I can't leave. And and so I stayed one more day, and then his whole medical team came in the next day, and they're like, okay, mom, time to get out, because if you don't go, he's not going to be able to do the work he needs to recover and to heal. And it was like that really profound moment of like, oh yeah, he's got to be able to do his own work too, and I can't get in the way of that, you
Mhm.
know. And so those are all things that I realized, if you're like really wanting, like, what is your biggest tip to do? Freaking grounding.
Mhm.
Barefoot in the grass. That's why I have my little plant here. If I feel ungrounded, I'll just reach out and touch it really quick when I'm with a client, and it'll instantly ground me. Um, I can't tell you like how amazing grounding is for protecting, transmuting your energy, because oftentimes we can't always protect our energy, right? But as healers, we're really, what my friend who's a medicine man told me, he goes, we're hollow bones. We are channels of light, and that light can go one way or the other. And so our job is to send it and release it. And if we receive it, release it, and to transmute those things and to let them go. And that's why grounding is so amazing, because Mother Earth is always like, hey, come over here. I'll help you. Release your energy, transmute that energy. And um anytime I feel imbalanced, even my husband, he'll notice, he's like, you need to go ground yourself. Go barefoot out in the grass. Get out there.
Love it.
Yeah. One day he was like, we're going to the river. And I'm like, I don't want to go. I get all grouchy. Like, that's when you know you need to go, when you're like, you have resistance against it.
Right.
And yeah, he's like, let's go. And I'm like, I don't want to get out of the car. I'm not going to go. He goes, I'm not leaving until you put your feet in the river. And I was like, I'm wearing leggings. I'm not getting in the river. And he's like, okay, we'll stay here all day. And I was like, fine. I got in the river. Like 5 minutes later, I'm like, ah, I feel so good. you know? So, I mean,
What a good husband you have.
it, I have an
That's
amazing
awesome.
husband. I'm very blessed. He's like my protector. So,
Well, thank you for sharing that tip. I know it's worked really well for me in the past, but it's good to hear that validation. And I love the saying about the bones being hollow and the energy is meant to move through us. And that's just a perfect description of what it provides. So I'd love to switch gears a little bit. I know there's two things specifically I would love to fit in before we finish up, if we can fit them both in. But two of the things that I thought were really unique about you, the first one is you talk a lot about tattoos and their spiritual meanings. I just thought that was so unique. I've never really heard anyone talk about that. And especially when you shared about the forearm tattoos, because I have one on each forearm. So if
Yeah.
you could just share a little bit about that and even how you kind of discovered the spiritual meanings of tattoos.
Oh my gosh. Speaking of awesome husbands, we actually he's was in naturopathic medical school, and we went to this little mini like convention thing where they were showing it was like an energy healing device. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. Like it kind of ground is like a device that grounded your energy and transmuted energy for you. It was really cool. And the lady noticed that I had a tattoo, and she goes, oh, can I scan your tattoo? And I was like, sure, why? And she was like, well, one of the things I've noticed is anytime I scan someone's tattoo, it shows up as a depleted energy leakage point in the body. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And then I remember as the day went on, I was like, oh, tattoos release energy. Oh my God, tattoos are healing. Holy shit. And like I already knew, because my work actually started with understanding the meaning of birthmarks as where if you have a birthmark in a specific area, it means something about your life path and your journey and your personality. And it like all started to just like click in my brain. And I have an autistic brain, so it's like click, 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 and like little visions and weird things. And I was like, oh my God, tattoos are healing, and where they're located tell us what we're healing and why. And holy shit. And so sorry, I curse. Hopefully that's okay. If not, you're
That's
gonna have to yep.
perfectly fine.
And I remember posting on Facebook, I'm like, tell me where your tattoo is and I'll tell you why you got it. And like all my friends are like, oh, okay, here. And everyone's like, holy crap, that's accurate. How do you know this? And I'm like, I don't know. And I just started like one day sharing, and it just blew up. And everyone was like, yeah, how did you know that about me? And I was like, I did. I figured it out. Everything clicked with all this spiritual knowledge and realizing that tattoos are releasing energy. And so you think about like when we have an illness or an injury, and this was taught to me by my medicine man friend. So sorry, this kind of squirrels a little bit, but it all comes together. We were sitting there, and he called out to this guy across the road, and he goes, hey, yo, you're going to break your leg if you don't forgive that guy. And I was like, why? And he goes, the energy congests and the body breaks when the energy is not released. And so we think about when we get cuts or wounds, it's our bodies, we're trying to release things, right? And so I had this realization that the tattoos were making little energy releases in the body. And so based on what I already knew with those birthmarks, I just clicked it all together and realized these are healing for people. And I'm actually almost done with editing my book that's done with that, but I'm even going to go to a tattoo artist myself, because one of my things I'm struggling with is blood pressure. And I'm going to get tattoos in certain locations that connect with blood pressure to see if it helps. I use myself as a human guinea pig. But I had a friend who was like, oh yeah, I used to get eczema right here in the ditch of my arm. When I got a tattoo here, I never got eczema again. And I know spiritually, eczema is unreleased, unprocessed emotions that have been festering in the body, and the body tries to push them out of the skin. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
it's been mind-blowing to me.
That's incredible. So I know you can't share about all the tattoos and all the different places, but what is if you could just pick one to share about the location and what it means.
Mm. Well, I know you brought up your forearm tattoo, so maybe we should talk to everybody about that,
Yep.
because they're
I
probably already
have Anahata chakra right
right.
here.
So when we talk about the forearms, these are about control. And so when people get tattoos in the forearm, they are saying someone or something has been controlling me that I'm breaking free from. These are tattoos of people that are saying, I am no longer going to be controlled by someone, something. I often see these with people who have been experiencing narcissistic abuse, and they're breaking free from abusive partners or parents. And so to me, this is kind of like that FU tattoo. It's like saying, F you, you're not controlling me. I'm taking my personal strength, my personal power back. And I am willing to fight for that power and no longer allow anyone to steal that from me. And so, you know, there's always a dark side to these tattoos, right? Because on the converse side, because people are like, well, what about all the bad people that get tattoos? Well, yeah, that tattoo can also indicate that someone's a narcissist, right? I mean, clearly you're not, right? But you know, we look at the dark side sometimes, and people are like, why don't you ever talk about the dark side? And that's for that exact reason, because like people could misunderstand, you know, every time they see someone with that tattoo, they could judge them. And so I very don't really, I mean, like this is one of the first times I've ever talked about that. It's like I don't really talk about that negative side because we go back to that original belief system that I believe anyone and everyone can heal, even those with narcissistic abuse tendencies, right? And so if we talk about the dark side, we take away the power of the healing. But you know, that's in general kind of what those tattoos signify on the wrist.
So cool. Love it. And you actually have a book about that. Is that already out? Tattoo Medicine, Spiritual Meaning of Tattoos?
It's not, we're, this year was rough. It was supposed to be out by October, but if you guys follow me, you know that like you just heard that I was in the hospital. My dad had quadruple bypass. My son was in the hospital. It's just been a rough year. And so we're finishing the editing, and hopefully by spring it should be
Oh,
out. I do have a wait list on my website if anybody's interested in it. And
yes, I'm gonna hop right on that. Get it from my
yes,
mom. She loves tattoos. She's covered in them.
oh, that's so
So
awesome.
yeah, kind of pivoting again, I would love for you to talk about aura colors in the soul's purpose. This is another one of your specialties.
Yes. You know, I think this probably all connects with my art background because, you know, I actually have been a professional artist and used to sell paintings and art and stuff. But in working with my clients, I'll actually get this out. I remember one day, and this is my little pen basket just for reference. I had a client, she goes, oh, do the colors of the pens that you're using have any meaning? And I was sitting there thinking, and I was like, I never thought about that. And almost like spirit was like, yes, they do. They have meaning. And I started to sit with it and understand. And I realized that every color that was showing up with someone, especially around their higher self, but even with their consciousness and subconscious, because I kind of look at three of the many layers of the body's energy, told me about the person's soul purpose. And so, you know, like a person would come through with red. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this person's a warrior of light. They're like the spiritual superheroes, the philanthropists, the ones who went to fight for others and to right the wrongs of the world and heal people. And the people with yellow auras are like my creative healers, the ones that create like art and music and poetry and making things with their hands that are healing with people. I also noticed that the colors are connected with different medical conditions. But that was something that started to become a beautiful part of my sessions with my clients because I was like, oh, well, yeah, we got all this stuff that we need to heal, but let me tell you about your soul purpose. Let me tell you, you know, with this green color that you have, that you're a heart-centered, earth-based healer, that you probably are very connected with the earth and the animals and herbalism and plant medicine and things like that. And I also found that people with green energy have a little bit of an inner skeptic going on, which is really funny because they won't believe anything you tell them. And so anytime someone comes through with green energy, I'm like, okay, I need to come forward with something that's going to click with them right away, so that they'll immediately be like, okay, she knows me. She's picked it up
Mhm.
because I know they have that inner skeptic. But yeah, it's just been a beautiful thing, and it's so cool to be able to see everybody's different energies. And I think that's also interconnected with seeing that Christ energy coming out of his hands. It was like showing me the energy within people. But yeah, it's just been so cool to be able to be like, oh, this person's got pink. Well, like, I've actually found pink and turquoise around someone usually means they're in a spiritual awakening too. Um,
Mhm.
besides, being empathic and things like that. So it's been amazing, and it's actually something that I'm going to be writing extensively. And my next book, which I'm going to be working on as soon as the tattoo book's done, which is called Becoming Spirit Fluent, Speaking the Language of Your Soul, which I also think I might have a wait list on my website for that one already. I don't know. But if you're on the tattoo wait list, you'll probably get thrown on that one anyways. But yeah, I could talk for hours about that because it's just so fascinating to be able to just understand who someone is just based on their color alone.
It absolutely is. And so obviously not all of us can see auras. So for those of us who can't, is there a way that we can tap into our own aura color?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you can do things like run off and get like an aura color photo, or work with someone does aura readings. But if you want to just do it by yourself, what I found the easiest way is just to get a color wheel, like what you had in grade school. And really what we do is I just tell people to put the color wheel in front of you and just to take a few deep breaths and say, I am setting the intention of seeing my aura or my soul color, and just sit there and just really kind of breathe into feeling that, and open your eyes and notice the first color that you focus on. And it may not be your favorite color. I will tell you, like some people, like they come in, I'm like, your aura color is brown. And they're like, ew, I don't like brown. And then when I tell them what brown is, which is brown is my giving tree people. They're like big stoic nurturing trees. Um, but when I tell them what it is, they're like, oh yeah, that's totally me. So remember, it may not always be a color that you like, but the first color you focus on is most likely your soul and aura color. And sometimes people are like, well, I see all the colors. And then I'm like, you're probably a rainbow soul purpose then, which means that you can access all aura colors and abilities, which gets a little bit, you know, complicated, but I have a whole podcast episode on it if someone wants to go listen to what the rainbow soul purpose is. Because there's a lot of people who are waking up right now who have that rainbow soul purpose, and it's a bigger purpose than just a symbol or a color.
Mhm. Yes, I will definitely link your podcast below. So we're
Mhm.
just coming to the end here, and there are so many other subjects I would have loved to dive into, but we only have so much time.
Sure.
Is there anything that you would like to share with the viewers as just a last positive, uplifting message, or if you could just say one thing, what would that be?
I feel like what I should say is that the most important messages come from your heart. They don't come from anxiety, traumas, or life experiences. And that if you're ever feeling like you're invaluable or don't matter, or that you don't have spiritual gifts, you do. And everyone plays a very important role and part in the worlds around them. And everyone has beautiful gifts and abilities. And we all have the ability to heal. We all have the ability to access intuition, even if it's just for ourselves, sometimes for others. And so just remember that you are all beautiful spiritual humans with beautiful, diverse gifts, abilities, um, and purposes. And don't worry about trying to fit into boxes or to be like other people, but just learn to be who you are. And that is where you will find your soul purpose. And it's where I found mine, just being myself authentically. And it sounds cliched, but it's true. And to remember also that you're divinely loved. And even when you feel like you're not, there is always someone, somewhere, whether it's God, the universe, Mother Earth, family, friends, there's always someone who loves you.
Thank you for that beautiful message, and thank you for being my guest.
Thank you
I'll
so
leave
much.
all of your information below.
That sounds wonderful. Thank you for
Thank
having
you
me.
so much. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.